The First World War was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. It's said that only two things in life are certain: death and taxes. But during this global conflict, a third thing could be added to the list: disease. From pandemics to new diseases emerging, the First World War saw an unprecedented amount of sickness and suffering. Here is the First World War in 100 seconds. In Sarajevo, Archduke Franz Ferdinand has met his demise. Europe is tense as the Austrians are preparing for intervention. Soon the Russians would jump to the defense of Serbia, while Germany supports Austria unconditionally. As the French and British were making up their mind about the conflict, the Germans would declare war on them and began their invasion through Belgium. This caused a political crisis in Britain. They had obligations to defend Belgium, not to mention being tied to the Antwerp cordial. Not only did they have to fight to protect Belgium, but also to protect their own national interest. As the British Expeditionary Force made their way to the front lines, they were accompanied by the medical staff, who would tend to the wounded and sick. With them, they brought along supplies for the soldiers, including 16 boxes of what was described as small brown pills. The men had no idea that these pills would forever change the way wars were fought. These were the first ever field rations of the recently synthesized drug, quinine. Quinine was effective against malaria, which was a concern for the troops fighting in tropical regions like Africa or Asia. But it was also effective against something else, something no one knew about yet, something that would soon ravage the world. Soon after the war started, the German troops entered a small village in Belgium. The village had a population of around 700 people, most of whom were civilians. Within 2 days, almost every single person in the village was dead. The reason? A virus. The Germans had inadvertently unleashed the Spanish flu into the world. At first it wasn't too bad. There were some cases of pneumonia and a few deaths here and there. But then it got worse. The virus spread rapidly, causing a pandemic that would infect over 500 million people worldwide, killing around 100 million of them. It was especially deadly for the soldiers who were living in close quarters with poor sanitation. Soldiers would come down with fevers, chills, and a racking cough. Many of them wouldn't make it out alive. Even the medical staff weren't safe. In some places, entire medical units were wiped out by the virus. But even though the virus was spreading like wildfire, there was nothing the soldiers could do about it. At this point, no one really understood how viruses worked. What we know today as the Spanish flu was later found to be caused by an H1N1 virus. This is the same strain of influenza that causes the seasonal flu. But back then, the difference between the two was unclear. All they knew was that something was killing a lot of their men, and there was nothing they could do about it. It wasn't just the Spanish flu that was wreaking havoc among the troops. There were other diseases that were just as deadly, like cholera, typhoid fever, and dysentery. Dysentery is an intestinal infection that causes diarrhea and stomach cramps. It can be contracted by eating contaminated food or water, and it is especially dangerous for those already weakened by malnutrition. This was a problem for both sides during World War I, as the conditions were often unsanitary and the food was in short supply. The result was thousands upon thousands of cases of dysentery, not to mention other gastrointestinal illnesses. Then there was typhus, an infectious disease that's spread by lice and fleas. It causes high fever, headache and rash, and if left untreated, can be fatal. This was a particular problem for the troops who were fighting in the trenches, as the close quarters made it easy for the insects to spread from person to person. Trench foot was another common ailment that affected soldiers during World War I. As you can imagine, spending long periods of time in wet, muddy trenches could lead to some pretty nasty foot problems. Soldiers would often have to walk barefoot through the muck, which would leave their feet open to all sorts of infections. Not to mention the fact that they were constantly having to deal with rats. Rats carry diseases that can cause everything from skin infections to the plague. And believe me, no one wants to deal with the plague, especially not in the middle of a war. On top of all this, the soldiers were also exposed to poisonous gases. The first poison gas to be used in World War I was chlorine, which was released by the Germans in 1915. Chlorine is a greenish-yellow gas that can cause severe respiratory problems and even death. This was used in an attempt to disinfect the trenches and get rid of those pesky rats, but it ended up being more harmful to humans than anything else. Other gases that were used included phosgene, which can cause fluid to accumulate in the lungs, and mustard gas, which is a blistering agent that can burn through flesh with its yellow cloud. It's safe to say that all these gases were pretty awful, and soldiers who were exposed to them often had to be treated for respiratory problems and other injuries. But the use of poison gas wasn't the only new tactic that was employed during the war. Machine guns were also widely used for the first time. And let's face it, when you're stuck behind enemy lines with a broken leg and your best friend just got shot in the head, the last thing you want to hear is the sound of a machine gun. Oh wait, actually that's the worst sound ever. It might not seem like a big deal today, but back then it was a game changer. Machine guns were able to fire hundreds of rounds per minute, making them a very effective weapon for the defense. This led to a stalemate on the Western Front, as the attacking forces would suffer heavy casualties before even getting close to the enemy lines. But even though the machine guns were deadly, they couldn't compare to the impact that tanks would have on warfare. The first tank was built in 1915, and it was called, creatively enough, the tank. The British were the first to use it in combat, and it proved to be an effective weapon against the German forces. Tanks were able to move across no man's land without being as exposed as other vehicles, making them a less obvious target than horses. Plus, they were carrying weapons that could cause serious damage from afar. Medical science was still trying to catch up to the rapid advancements in weaponry. In the past, battlefield medicine was mostly about patching up wounds and hoping for the best. But now, there was a need for more sophisticated treatment methods. Doctors began experimenting with new techniques like blood transfusions and anti-tetanus shots. X-rays were also used to diagnose injuries, which was a huge advancement at the time. The discovery of blood groups also helped to save many lives, as it reduced the risk of fatal reactions during transfusions. It was also found that infected wounds were a major cause of death, and so doctors began to develop new methods of treating them, such as the use of antibiotics. This was a huge breakthrough, not just for the treatment of wounds, but for the prevention of death as well. By the end of World War I, medical science had advanced significantly, thanks in part to the development of new drugs and technologies. This progress saved countless lives and helped to improve the overall health of the soldiers who were fighting in the war. So next time you think about the horrors of war, remember that medical science was also advancing during that time, and that knowledge is power. What are your thoughts on the use of quinine during World War I? Did you know that it was used to treat malaria? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. If you did, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on our latest videos. Thanks for watching.